Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Josh Redstone, and this video is for my cognitive neuroscience students, the students who are taking CGSC 3501 with me in person during the early summer semester at Carleton University. Specifically, this is an instructional video for your essay assignment and also your essay topic proposal assignment. So what I'm going to do today is go through all of the fine points, all the details, all the things you'll need to know to complete each of these assignments and to complete each of them well. So let's everybody open up our course outlines. That's where we have descriptions for both of these assignments, and we'll take a look at those now. We'll start with the proposal, and I'll give you detailed instructions on what to do there. And then I'll move on to talk about the essay assignment, and I'll give you some tips and tricks for writing a really good neuroscience essay. All right, let's get into it. So if you open up your course outline and take a look at the table that breaks down the evaluation in this class, you'll notice that the term paper topic proposal is worth 20% of your final grade. That's a pretty big chunk. And the final term paper is worth 40%. So together, these are worth 60% of your grade. That's a lot. The term paper topic proposal is due, initially I indicated June 5th. But because of the recent storm and the fact that I've had to push quiz deadlines back because some people are still without electricity, means that I may slightly extend that deadline. I probably can't extend it too much. But I will do what I can, and I'll make an announcement regarding this in our next in-person lecture this Tuesday. The final term paper is due on June 26th, and there's nothing I can do about that. That's the final day of the exam period, and the term paper serves as a take-home final exam. So that is the due date for all take-home final exams, the final day of the exam period. Now, further down in the course outline, I outline the term paper topic proposal. Hi, Tua. Hi. Hello. 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 Now, your proposal should be 750 to 1,000 words in length. And what you need to do is identify a topic for your term paper. You have to provide a thesis statement or a research question and a sort of rough outline, or what I like to call the plan of attack for your paper. Don't forget to include a bibliography. I'm looking for an annotated bibliography, and I'll explain what that means in a moment. First, let's go through all the steps to this assignment. Now, if you go to the Helpful Materials module on Brightspace, you will find a template for the topic proposal, and I highly recommend you use this template. All you need to do is delete my instructions after you've filled out the sections of the template. Basically, what the template is asking you to do is provide me with a working title and try and think of something fun that captures the topic of your paper. The topic, or your area of interest, calls for you to provide me with a few sentences describing, exactly that, the topic you've chosen to write your paper on, or the area of interest that it falls within. You might want to talk about philosophical questions to do with neuroscience, or that are perhaps informed by neuroscience. For example, if you're a philosophy person in this neuroscience class, you might want to tackle questions related to free will. So that would be your area of interest. And of course, there's a lot of neuroscientific research that can inform a philosophical discussion about freedom of the will and whether we have it, right? So that's just one example. Maybe you're interested in artificial intelligence. You might want to discuss realizing some of the functions of the human brain in some kind of artificial cognitive system, like a computer program, an artificial neural network, a robot or something, right? So you would have to tell me about that in your area of interest. Likewise with linguistics or psychology, and how they are related to neuroscience. Whatever question you pick, whatever area of interest you choose, just has to be related to the themes of the class, and you need to tell me about that area of interest in a few sentences in your topic proposal. The next section is pretty straightforward. It's where you will provide me with your thesis statement or your research question. All research essays need to have this, and as I mentioned in one of our recent in-person lectures, this is probably where most people go wrong, right? They'll deliver a paper that is mostly like a survey paper or a summary of things that you've learned. It is not enough to do that for this assignment. Depending on how well those papers are written, those papers that don't actually deliver an argument, in my class, they can fall between, the B range into the C range or the D range, again, depending on how well or how poorly they're written. So to get into the A range, you really need to be making an argument. And your thesis statement is the statement where you will tell me, the reader, what you will be arguing in this paper. Another way to do this is to frame it using a research question. So a thesis statement would be something like, in this paper I will argue that, and your thesis follows the that, right? But if you're doing a research question, pose your research question and then tell me right away how you think you will answer it or what you think the answer you will argue for is going to be. For example, let's say, I don't know, you're interested in getting kind of philosophical again, and you want to talk about freedom of the will. You might pose a question like, do we have freedom of the will? I don't know. That's a pretty straightforward question. And your answer might be something like, using lines of evidence from neuroscience and psychology, I will argue that we do not have freedom of the will, right? So your answer to your research question is your thesis statement. So there's two ways you can do it. You can just straight up deliver me a thesis statement, or you can pose a question and then answer it. Both approaches are acceptable. Now for your plan of attack, this is probably the most substantive part of the proposal. What you have to do is tell me your plan of attack for writing your paper. What kind of sources will you consider? How will you execute your argument? All of that stuff, how you envision the paper going, should be there. And I realize that your paper may turn out differently than how you envision it at this stage of the process. And that's fine. The point of this, after all, is for me to give you detailed feedback specific to your proposal so that you can then go and write a really good essay. So even if your plan of attack is bad, I'll let you know what you can do to improve it. So that's basically it when it comes to the proposal. You want to tell me your area of interest, and your area of interest has to be related to cognitive neuroscience. You can kind of dip your toes into any of the other cognitive sciences if you want, but you really should be dealing with a neuroscientific question, or a question that can be answered using the tools and findings of neuroscience, even if that question is not, strictly speaking, neuroscientific, right? So you have to do that. Then you have to tell me what you are going to argue or what research question you will answer, and then your plan of attack, how you will execute your argument, what kinds of sources you'll use, what kind of research you want to conduct, what kind of paper you're writing. Are you writing an adjudicative paper that evaluates multiple different answers to a question? Are you writing a positive argument where you argue for something, or a negative argument where you argue against something? Tell me what kind of paper you're thinking of writing in your proposal. And lastly, of course, if you have any sources already, let me know by placing them in an annotated bibliography. You can use whatever citation style you want. And there is a citation guide available at Purdue's online writing lab, or OWL, which is linked in the helpful materials module on Brightspace. Use that if you're not sure how to cite things. They have all of the citation guides that you could ever want. Just pick one and go with it. Use the one you're most familiar with, I would say, is the best advice. If you don't have any sources, you could at least cite the textbook and or my lectures. Make sure everything is cited properly. And because it's an annotated bibliography, what you have to do is just, in a word or two, describe the source. So if you have a paper, cite the paper and then tell me what topic the paper is on or what the paper argues. Just 1 or 2 sentences is fine. If you've got a book, tell me in 1 or 2 sentences about that book. You don't have to tell me, what library you got it from or anything like that, but you have to tell me what it is and why you're using it. Maybe you'll use Descartes' Error by Antonio Damasio, which is a really cool book on the neuroscience of the relationship between emotions and reasoning. Well, tell me that, right? Cite the book and then say, this book deals with the reason-emotion dichotomy from a neuroscientific perspective. Simple as that, right? So I think that's about it for the proposal. That's all I'll say on that for now. And let's talk a little bit about the paper. Okay, just from the course outline here, your term paper, again, works as the final take-home examination in this course. And that's why it's due on the last day of the exam period, June 26th. You'll have to submit it by 11:59 on June 26th on the Dropbox on not Carleton Central. What's it called again? Brightspace. Submit it on Brightspace, right? Again, it's worth 40% of your final grade, so you'll want to be very aware of things like not only proper argumentation, but proper research. You want to make sure that your writing is clear and concise. Your writing should be error-free. It should be free of spelling, grammar, sentence structure errors, punctuation errors. It should be free of errors of reasoning. It should be free of logical fallacies, so on and so forth. That's what I'm going to tell you all about now, how to make sure you do that. Obviously, your essay is going to be typed because everything is being submitted digitally. Try to go for 11, 12 point font size and try to use a nice looking font. You must submit your essays in doc or PDF format. I cannot open other kinds of files, so it has to be, Microsoft Word or Google Docs, so that's doc or docx, or PDF format. I will not be able to open any other kinds of files. So make sure you submit your essay and your essay proposal in the right file format. Make sure that it's double spaced. And the length is between 2,000 and 2,500 words, excluding the bibliography and any title page. So do not go over or under that limit. Do not go under 2,000 words, and do not go over 2,500 words. The main reason for that is that I don't have a teaching assistant this term, and I'd like to be able to mark your work and get it back to you as soon as I can. So don't go over those word limits, okay? Okay. Now, the bibliography or references section for your essay doesn't have to be annotated. You only have to do an annotated bibliography for your proposal. But you do definitely need to have a bibliography or references section, and you need to make sure you cite everything properly. The reason for that is avoiding plagiarism. You really need to be careful not to plagiarize. And take a look in the course outline where the guidelines for avoiding plagiarism are. Let's just go over them quickly now. Remember, reproducing or paraphrasing portions of someone else's published or unpublished material, regardless of the source, and presenting these as your own ideas without proper citation is plagiarism. So you have to cite everything properly. When in doubt, cite. It's really that simple. Make sure that quoted Lines are placed in quotation marks and cited. Make sure that paraphrased materials are cited properly. Cite everything properly. Please do not commit plagiarism. Please. Also, if you submit an essay, a take-home exam, lab report, anything like that written in whole or in part by someone else, that's plagiarism. If you use ideas or direct verbatim quotations or paraphrase material, concepts, ideas, anything like that without appropriate acknowledgement, that is plagiarism. Using another's data or research findings. You need to cite things properly, and when it comes to data that may not have been released from a lab yet, and it's not out there in the literature yet, you would absolutely need permission from the lab director to use that. So definitely don't do that without permission. If you fail to acknowledge sources by failing to properly cite or use quotation marks, that's plagiarism, so you have to be very careful. And if you hand in the same piece of work or substantially the same piece of work for credit in more than one class without permission from the course instructor, in this case from me and from the person in the previous class, that is also plagiarism. I don't mind reusing material. Obviously, you could reuse your essay proposals. In fact, that's the idea behind the proposals. The proposals, once you're done and you have all your feedback, can be reworked into the introduction for your essay. Don't just cut and paste everything, though. You have to make it sound like an essay rather than a proposal. But that's the idea. But if you had a paper in a previous class where you discussed an idea and you'd like to continue discussing that in this class, that's fine. You can quote yourself and cite yourself, cite your old paper, and continue working on the same idea. That's fine with me. But you need to cite things properly, even if it's your own work. Now again, I don't care what citation style you use. You can use APA, MLA, Harvard, Chicago. I've even had people use IEEE before in my classes. That's fine. Just be consistent. Don't switch between styles halfway through. And use the Purdue University Online Writing Lab to help you. What kind of papers can you write? Well, all papers need to have a bit of survey or lit review, right? After you've introduced your topic and given me your thesis and your plan of attack, you'll need to review some literature. And when you're doing this, when you're explaining the papers, books, book chapters, and all of the materials you've gathered in your research, you want to make sure that you're writing for an uninformed yet intelligent layperson. Pretend it's not me, right? Pretend that I don't know anything about neuroscience, and explain it to me as if I was smart enough to understand neuroscience, but I just don't know any neuroscience yet. So that's a good way to do that. You don't want your entire paper to be all survey, though. It can't just be a summary of things you've learned. It needs to have an argument. So nobody will be writing a survey paper, but there will be elements of surveying and literature review in your papers. As I mentioned before, you can also deliver a positive argument, right? You're arguing for a particular position. Or you could deliver a negative argument, you're arguing against a particular position. Or, and this is my favorite, you can adjudicate between multiple positions, usually two, but possibly more. And this is called an adjudicative paper. It's helpful to tell me what kind of paper you're thinking of writing in your plan of attack, in your essay proposal. So do make sure you do that. Now, I don't think I have to say this in a third-year class, but forget about the 5-paragraph essay, right? That's just a teaching tool. You will need, of course, an intro paragraph and a concluding paragraph, or two. But don't limit yourself to 3 body paragraphs, right? Use as many paragraphs as you need. And you want to think of each paragraph as a sort of step or stage in your argument or in your explanation. Each paragraph has a job to do, right? Each paragraph should be about a specific topic. that's a good way to know when to start a new paragraph, when you're about to change topics. Maybe you're discussing functional neuroimaging scans, and then you want to move on to talk about behavior. Well, keep those two in different paragraphs, and depending on how much you have to say, maybe you'll want a few paragraphs to discuss all of that material, all of your neuroimaging stuff and then all of your behavioral stuff, for example, right? And the paragraphs should flow, right? Your whole essay should have a bit of a flow to it. You don't want things to be disjointed. You want to use contour sentences to sort of make one paragraph flow or logically transition into the next. You'll want to do things like signposting, Now that we've talked about this, it's time to talk about this, right? Let the reader know where we're at as we're following your argument, reading your essay. Now remember, the purpose of all essays is to deliver an argument, right? The word essay comes from the French. It means to try or to make an attempt. An attempt to do what? To convince the reader of your thesis or your argument. So you need to deliver an argument. You cannot just summarize or do lit review. Yes, you have to do some of that, but you have to deliver an argument or answer a research question. So you want to pick a thesis, right? A main theme, a position regarding that theme, deliver that in a thesis statement, or use the research question and answer approach. Now remember, arguments consists of premises and conclusions. You need to make sure that your premises are true, and you need to make sure that the conclusion follows from those premises. And you need to make sure that everything you're saying is straightforward, clear, and concise. Do not try and sound smart or make things complicated. Don't use jargon. Keep things as simple as you can. That really is probably the most important piece of advice I could give you for a paper like this. Now, of course, in the introduction, which could be a paragraph or two, you want to make sure you introduce your topic, your area of interest. Give me your thesis statement or your research question. Describe how your essay will proceed. Basically, take your essay proposal and rewrite it once you've got my feedback, and that should work as a pretty good introduction to your paper. In the body is where you will conduct literature review and then present the argument in your paper. And remember, each paragraph works as a step in your argument. It should be either explaining something or arguing something, delivering one of the premises of your argument. You could have a paper about that. So maybe a few paragraphs reviewing some evidence, and then a paragraph saying what that means for your argument, and so on and so forth. Then in the conclusion, you sort of want to restate everything you said in your introduction, right? Except make it kind of past tense. In your intro, you're going to be saying things like, I will argue that, or I will review these findings. Excuse me. In your conclusion, you're going to be saying things like, in this paper, I have argued that, or I have reviewed these lines of evidence, right? So your conclusion is a lot like your introduction, just kind of rewritten to be the end rather than the beginning. What kind of language should you use in a paper? Well, as I mentioned a moment ago, you want to keep it simple, right? Use the KISS method. Keep it simple, silly. Keep it as simple as you can, but no simpler, as Albert Einstein once said. Don't use jargon. Don't use complex language. If you're going to use words, big complicated technical terms, make sure you get them right? Use the dictionary, use the thesaurus. These are helpful tools. You just make use of them. You have access to really good dictionaries and thesauruses for free via the Carleton University Library. So definitely take advantage of that. A lot of people ask me if it's okay to use the first person pronoun I. Absolutely. I don't know why people think this is not good to do. I think it's an English major thing. I don't know. Anyway, you can use the first person pronoun. For example, in this paper, I will argue that. But you can also use the third person. You know, this essay will argue that. If you want to get really fancy, you could use the royal we, right? In this paper, we will argue that. That's pretty cool. That's nice and fancy. A couple things with punctuation. You know, watch out for long sentences. You don't want long, cumbersome sentences. Watch out for run-on sentences. And on the opposite end of that, watch out for sentence fragments. I'm not going to explain what any of these things are, but you will get feedback, you know, on your proposals where I'll say, oh, I found a typo, I found the sentence fragment, found a run-on sentence, you know, found a dangling modifier, found some problems with parallelism. You know, these are all grammatical things that you can go and learn how to avoid on your own. But when you commit them, I will point them out. And it's important to avoid these problems because they will make your writing unclear. Oh, and semicolons. A lot of people don't use semicolons correctly. Just maybe steer clear of them, or look up how you're supposed to use them. A lot of people don't use them right. Don't just use them. Make sure you're using them the correct way. I don't know. I have a semicolon pet peeve. A couple of other general do's and don'ts. Do's first. Again, write for an intelligent but uninformed layperson. You know, assume the reader, who is me, is not your neuroscience professor, but rather just an intelligent person who doesn't know anything about the topic you're about to discuss. So, you know, once you imagine that that's who's reading your paper, right, you realize, oh, well, I can't just drop this term in here. You know, I can't just say fMRI or lateral geniculate nucleus or, you know, I don't know, what's some other stuff, the 6 layers of the cortex. You can't just drop that stuff in there unexplained. You have to explain it for the reader. This shows me that you're writing your essay properly and that you are talking about what you think you're talking about, right? This is one of the ways I will evaluate you and how you're using the knowledge in this class. So that's very important. Also, try and explain things clearly rather than simply dumbing things down. It's always good to use illustrative examples to show how things work, but don't feel like you have to dumb things down. Just say things clearly and concisely. Be very mindful of technical terms. You know, I have a semicolon pet peeve. I also have a concept pet peeve. A lot of people use this term incorrectly, and this is a technical term in the cognitive sciences. Concept refers to something like an idea or a mental model, a mental representation of a type or a category, right? That's what a concept is. But a lot of people will say, the concept of synesthesia or the concept of long-term memory. No, you're talking about long-term memory, not the concept of long-term memory. Do you see what I mean? So be careful to use technical terms correctly. Concept is a technical term that has a particular usage that's correct in the cognitive sciences. Same with all technical terms. So make sure you use them properly. And finally, try and use inclusive language, right? Don't use he exclusively or mankind, you know. Use humanity. You can use he, she, one, or they. Just use inclusive language, you know. Don't say stuff like, since the dawn of man, we have wondered about the brain, you know. No, just don't. Just don't do that. A couple of don'ts. You know, watch out for fallacies. Watch out for errors of reasoning, logical fallacies. A particular one you want to be careful of is the straw man here, especially if you're arguing against a position or adjudicating between positions. You don't want to make a straw man, you know, a weaker version out of the thing you're criticizing and knock your straw man over. No, you don't want to do that. You want to avoid like circular reasoning. You want to avoid, well, there are any number of informal and formal fallacies that you want to avoid. Again, this is not a critical thinking class, so I don't really think I have the time to tell you about all of them, but you can find these. You can find lists of fallacies and examples of what you need to watch out for. just to make sure that you're not committing any major errors of reasoning. Don't use big sweeping overgeneralized statements, like I mentioned before, since the beginning of time or since the dawn of man. I mean, I guess really this is more of a problem in my philosophy classes, but just in case, don't do that, right? Use correct phraseology. For example, a lot of people say, oh, there's this interesting finding, which begs the question, what about this? No, it raises the question. Again, begging the question is a technical term. It refers to a logical fallacy that's, like a kind of circular reasoning. What you want to say is this raises the question. It doesn't beg the question, it raises the question. Watch out for word choice, even making sure you're using the right its, or then versus than, or there versus there versus there, right? Like they are versus there as in over there versus there as in they are going over there, right? Or no, their dog is going over there, right? Different word choices. Be mindful of those and don't be careless of technical terms. A few other general tips and tricks. Your essay doesn't have to be bulletproof. Don't feel like you need to write some kind of paradigm-shifting neuroscience paper here. Don't feel like you need to get into a lab and construct an experiment. You don't have to write something that's absolutely bulletproof here, but you do have to write something that convinces the reader of your argument and uses proper argumentation and good evidence to do that. Again, make sure your writing flows. Your writing should have a flow to it. When you're writing your essay and when you're editing it, read it aloud to yourself. Don't sit there on the computer or print it out and read it in your head. Read it out loud. You'll be surprised how many errors you will catch by doing this that you will have missed if you were just reading it in your mind. And if you can, have a friend read over your essay as well, and be a nice friend and read theirs. Check each other's for typos and stuff. Use the Discord server to see if there are any of your classmates who would like to do this, right? You can also read examples of essays that you find online, but you have to make sure that those are actually good examples, right? Probably the best examples will be other neuroscience papers that you find in the course of your research, right? Or other academic papers in general. Try and write like that. What kind of sources will you want to go and identify? Well, as I mentioned, you can use the textbook, but you cannot rely exclusively on the textbook, right? You can't just write a paper that tells me everything you learned from like chapter 5 or something. You can't do that. You can use the textbook if you're describing like an area of the brain or an experiment or a neuroimaging technique or something like that. You use the textbook for that, for sure. But don't limit yourself to the textbook or to my lectures for that matter. You'll also want to use other academic sources, other papers, other books. Definitely you need to do that. Try and avoid non-academic sources, podcasts, YouTube videos. Stick to academic sources. Don't use non-academic sources. Oh, of course, avoid citing Wikipedia, right? Just don't. The problem, it's not that Wikipedia isn't good. It's just the fact that anyone can edit it, and Wikipedia has gotten a lot better over the years. But you don't know who's written these articles. It could be an expert, could be someone living in their mom's basement. You don't know. So avoid citing Wikipedia. You can use Wikipedia as a sort of library, and maybe in the sources for a Wikipedia article, there will be some good books and papers there. Go and use those sources if you like, but don't use the Wikipedia page, okay? Now, you can come up with a completely original idea, or you can tackle a question that you've been thinking about for a long time that you've encountered from another class. It's really up to you. When you're picking a topic for this essay, I think the most helpful thing is that it is an interesting topic to you, because that will make the writing and researching process a little bit easier on you. You know, if you're actually interested in what you're talking about, that helps enormously. Don't feel like you have to be like super original, though, you know. Maybe you'll come up with a question that no one's asked before, but if you haven't, that's absolutely fine. Maybe you're just going to tackle a perennial question, you know, a question that's come up time and again throughout the history of the cognitive sciences. That's fine too. Whatever is the most interesting for you. You know, again, this is kind of the point of these essay proposals. If I think you've picked a topic that's maybe not such a good idea, or if your thesis needs shoring up, if you need a better research question, if you're stuck on where to go as far as finding sources, if you're even having trouble coming up with an idea, that's what the proposal's for. It's so that I can help you with that. So if it's not all coming together right away for when you have to submit the proposal, don't panic, right? The proposal is there so that I have some way of helping you to develop your idea, to develop your argument, to get the research done, and to write the paper. So I guess the last thing I'll say is that I don't really have a rubric for this sort of assignment. But I can tell you that an A+ level paper should be basically error-free. No typos, no spelling, grammar, punctuation errors, nothing like that. No errors of reasoning. Very well written, and should feature something that's pretty original. It doesn't have to be like, you know, again, paradigm-shiftingly amazing. But yeah, it should be interesting. If not an original idea, provide an original take on it, and make sure that the writing and the argumentation is flawless. That is an A+ paper in my class. A paper in the A range from A- to A will be like this, but maybe we'll just have a few errors here and there. Maybe a little typo here and there, misspelling, a little mistake. Small things, you know, will be A to A- depending on the number of those errors. Papers in the B range and the high B range tend to have more errors and perhaps are not argued as well. When you get to the B- range, the writing tends to be not that great, and there tends to be not much of an argument. Papers in the C range, not much of an argument, bad writing, lots of mistakes, poor research. Papers in the D range, even worse, and I mean, papers in the F range will have just not attempted to do the assignment properly at all, right? And I very rarely fail people on assignments like this, because it's evident to me that in the vast majority of cases, people really do try, even if they're absolutely terrible at writing papers. They really do try. So I seldom fail people on assignments like this. So it's got to be like really phoned in, badly written, no argument, and that's an F. So, you know, again, I don't really have like a formalized rubric, but that is how I evaluate papers. So now I think you know everything that you need to know to go ahead and get started on your proposal. And once you've got the feedback for your proposal, then you can go ahead and get started on writing your paper. Of course, if you have any questions about any of this, or if you've got a question related to some aspect of the proposal or the paper that I have not covered, please reach out to me. You can email me, you can reach out over my Discord server, and I will do my best to help you address whatever concerns you might have. All right, so that's all for this little instructional video that I'm shooting from my office / flop room / whatever this place is. I will see you all on Tuesday, and if you have any questions, yes, please do get in touch. And good luck with your essay proposals. I'm really looking forward to reading all of them. All right, bye for now, everyone.